فقد قال الله تبارك وتعالى في القرآن المجيد والفرقان الحميد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون وقال تعالى يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما. Dear respected brothers and sisters, I asked to be scheduled here for Jum'ah today so I could finish off my education khutbahs. So the last of three, unless something more important comes up, then maybe this theme will continue. So we spoke for two khutbahs in a row now. One begged the question, asked the question about why we have a duality, a kind of cognitive dissonance between how we perceive and view secular education versus how we perceive and view Islamic education. And it is a significant, I hope I conveyed this clearly, this is a significant moral issue for us. And this is not just in terms of education, but just in terms of our whole worldview, right? As Muslims, we are akhirah-centered people. And the conundrum, the cognitive dissonance, it's all internal. Everything is internal. What we are externally isn't a true reflection of our worldview, right? So a person can be apparently very, very dunya-centered in our conventional view, right? We look at them and we think, wow, look at this guy driving a fancy car, lives in a fancy house, earns millions, etc., etc., etc. But they can internally be extremely akhirah-centered. Dunya is just something they have in their hands, and they have plenty of it, and Allah has blessed them with that. But they recognize deeply that is their test. That is their test. And there's a lot they do internally in their privacy to manage the challenge of that test and to try to be prepared for their accountability to before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And there can be another person whose life apparently is frugal and they're regular in the masjid and etc., etc. And we assign in our conventional view piety and akhirah-centeredness to them, but they are deeply dunya-centered, because inside of their mindset they covet, right, wealth. They covet what people who have more than them have, and so on, and everything else is just part of their daily routine, right? Coming to the masjid and so on and so forth. So it's really important, and this idea of what we are in our worldview, I feel sometimes that it plays out in an even more profound way when it comes to education, because we recognize that education sets our children up. We all do this. There is no dispute. Nobody can argue that, especially people who Muslims living in the West. None of us will be like, oh yeah, I don't care about education. We all buy into this idea that education sets our children up for something. It sets them up for something. In that, if our worldview clearly and disproportionately prioritizes what is essentially a dangerous secular education, but we do not, despite knowing, even instinctively knowing that this is dangerous, we do not provide the mitigations with an equal, if not greater, emphasis on Islamic education. There is a serious moral problem there. And it betrays a fundamentally problematic worldview. And education isn't money. Education impacts how we think. It impacts our emotions. It impacts our worldview. It impacts our ambitions. It impacts our iman. That is the nature of education, right? It impacts us both in terms of embedding inside of us conviction and deen, and embedding inside of us iman, but it also does the opposite, right? Education also embeds kufr inside us, secularism inside of us, really fundamentally contradictory ideas inside of us, ones that from a worldview, philosophically at least, put us deeply at odds. And we don't know it. I can't, I give these examples to my students because I have time with them. I can't tell you the number of times I've had brothers and sisters sit in front of me, mashallah, did really well at university and so on. And apparently to their parents, they're good guys, right? They're good brothers, good sisters. They come to the masjid for Jum'ah. They're like you and me. And I can tell you one by one examples of how they've sat in front of me in a normal conversation and just uttered kufr. They've literally just gone and spouted kufr. They've said, they've just gone into because I have philosophical conversations with people, and they've just gone off and just parroted kind of just secular cliches and liberal cliches, because that's what they've picked up in school and university, and just pronounced kufr there and there, unaware, completely unaware, because of this problem, that it's not their fault. Go to school, do well. Go to college, do well. Go to university, do well. I don't negate that. But the counterbalance was not provided. A good Islamic education was not provided. An Islamic education that grounds them in the Islamic worldview was not provided. So of course they could, what in their mind, what's wrong with this particular liberal ideal? What's wrong with this particular secular value? The fact that it's kufr doesn't register because they don't have the Islamic education that provides them the ability to critically look at other ideas. I've already gone off on a tangent. So I'm going to publish today's khutbah, inshallah ta'ala. So in the UK, today's khutbah is about, it's advice on how to choose, right? So as parents, as elders, as community members, etc., how do we provide, what are the features that we should be aspiring to when seeking an Islamic education for our children? When looking at a potential Islamic a madrasah, when we're looking at the provision provided in our local masjid, when we're looking at taking on a private tutor for our children, and so on and so forth. But also, if you're involved in a masjid, right, you're involved in a committee or something like that, you pay for a madrasah back home, for example. Many of us do that. Then these are also some of the features that we really need to consider. Firstly, so in the UK, let's talk about UK. Islamic education for children is most commonly delivered through part-time madrasas, weekend schools or private tutors. And I spoke about this, it's about 80%. Full-time Islamic schools also exist, but remain a minority choice. About 2% of the community's children and youngsters study full-time in Islamic education. Regardless of the format, this decision is of course profound, right? But the vast majority cannot think beyond Quran and Salah. Even Aqidah. Like, I get parents come here and ask me about their children's progress all the time. They only ask about Quran. And I sometimes sit down, I prompt them. Would you like to know about how your child is doing in spiritual development? Would you like to know how your child is doing in Aqidah? Would you like to know how your child is doing in Seerah? And all these other subjects that we have? No, not interested. People get stunned by the questions, like, oh, and then they don't know what to ask, because we are so, even within our Islamic framing, we are so culturally indoctrinated that we don't even know what questions to ask. We don't even know what we should want for our children, right? Quran, and it is such a fundamentally basic expectation. In secular terms, right? Let me put this in secular terms. Our framing of an Islamic education is this. If I was to put it in school terms, it's us going to school, to primary school, and saying to the teacher, can you tell me if my child has the ability to connect the symbol of A to the sound of A? And then having which means phonics, so they've done their phonics. Okay, mashallah, they've done their phonics. And then I just want them to be able to just read the sentences. That's it. As long as he can do that, I'm happy. I don't need him to understand English, and I don't need him to understand what he's reading. That's all I want. That's it. That is the pinnacle of our expectation of Islamic education. That, to me, means that our understanding of Islamic education is fundamentally at the ABC level broken. All right? Call it because of the colonial, post-colonial hangover. Whatever the reason is, call it because of our dunya-centeredness, but it's fundamentally broken. So what should we be looking for? Firstly, an Islamic education should provide the following fundamentals to our children. Number one, deep conviction, yaqeen, deep conviction. What do we mean? The conviction that Islam is true. Allah does exist. The Prophet ﷺ is Allah's final and true messenger. The Quran is the true word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. These things are true. They are not ideas. They are not historical concepts. They are not somebody's philosophical idea. They are not my identity. They are truth. And their education has to at least attempt to instill that in them. Two, a commitment to worship. A commitment to worship, to ibadah. Why Allah created us. وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. We created mankind and jinn only to worship us. Three, an akhirah focused mindset. Constantly asking ourselves, how do I answer to Allah? I'm going to face accountability to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and so on. Akhirah focusedness. How am I prepared? Am I prepared for the ultimate accountability? Am I on the way to Jannah or am I on the way to Jahannam? Akhirah focused mindset. Noble character. And this should be because of Islam, not in spite of it. All right? They're not wonderful and charitable and really nice and really good to everybody, etc., because they're secular, because they're liberal. They can't be like that because of their liberality. They have to be like that because of their Islam, because they have been educated in that through Islam. Critical thinking, very, very important. There is no concept, and this is really philosophical, but there is no concept of appreciating the truth of something without critical thinking. Otherwise, it's just indoctrination. And I mean that when I talk about the truth of Islam. If you want to establish Islam as true, there has to be some critical thinking applied to the process of establishing that something is true, even if it's Islam. Otherwise, it's just indoctrination. All right? And our children, they grow to recognize this, by the way. At some point, they realize, I've just been indoctrinated into accepting Islam. Okay, I'm okay with it. Is it true? Is it not true? I don't know. It's a natural pathway. They just don't pay attention to it. I've told this story before. Son of a vicar in his 60s. We're on a leadership course together. Right, as a religious person, I always talk about religion with everybody, right? So I'm talking about religion, and right there and then, he asked himself, yeah, you know, my dad was a vicar, blah, 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 and he started really late. You know, and I've been raised religiously, and etc., etc. But do I really believe? Just there and then, he went, do I really believe? I'm not sure. Yeah, I don't think so. I'm like, what? What kind of a nonsense did I just witness? It's like that. It's as unimportant as that. In that moment, he can suddenly think about, do I believe? And then boom, right? Because fundamentally, it's his identity. It's not a commitment to the truth. He's Christian by identity. And Muslims have the same thing. And therefore, education has to build the critical thinking for them to be able to recognize the truth and then instill conviction and grow that conviction. Okay, now, what are the features that you need to look for in the education, even if it's a private tutor? Number one, the education provided has to be systematic, structured, purposeful, and outcome orientated. You need to ask questions like, is there a syllabus with clear learning outcomes, right? Are topics taught in a logical, age-appropriate sequence? Your child is being taught fiqh, but being taught the fiqh of 15-year-olds. Your child is 6. All right? Does the program build from foundational beliefs to practice and then to character? Is there a logic to the thinking of the teacher as he builds and sequences the learning outcomes and what he's teaching? Does the program build a systematic and outcomes-driven approach ensures that your child receives a coherent Islamic education? Not the teacher walks in on day 1, teaches what comes to his mind. Walks in on day 2 and goes, what did I teach you last week? Today we're going to do this, right? There's no system to it. There's no plan, nothing like that. It needs to be systematic and organized. Number 2, it needs to be responsive. Children face challenges every day that are unprecedented. Our children face challenges we've not faced. I grew up here in this country on the streets of Tower Hamlet. Rough place, man, I'm telling you. Rough place, not like some of you guys, you Chelmsfordians, right? Okay, and the challenges I faced back then, the challenges my children face are fundamentally different. The ones now are not, my children don't face challenges when it comes to the risk of falling into crime, etc., etc., but the challenges they face are deeply philosophical. The challenges that I faced were, there was a risk of me ending up in jail. The challenges my children face, there's a risk of them ending up kafir. That's the fundamental difference. All right, and I wouldn't know for the most part, right? So those challenges need to be recognized and responded to. Social media, identity confusion, peer pressure, mental health struggles, Islamic education. An Islamic education must respond to this. That teacher you're recruiting for your child, right, to privately tutor him from India or Pakistan, has to know these challenges, and the education has to respond to them. Questions are, does the teacher or madrasa understand your child's context, right? Are contemporary issues discussed through an Islamic lens? Is there space for questions, even doubts and dialogue? Are they going to be like, how dare you say that? Don't ever say something like that again. The relationship with the teacher has to be a safe space for teachers to be able to let out what's inside of them. And then the teacher educates them, right? Systematically undoes the damage that is already done, right? And then basically builds Iman back up. Number 3, Islamic education has to be transformative. Inspiring spirituality, inspiring worship, inspiring character. Education should change people. It should inspire these things. Our concepts like ihsan, the sweetness of Iman, the branches of Iman, part of the curriculum, is worship, salah, dhikr, dua, taught not just as ritual, but as spiritual experience. Our children guided to embody noble traits like humility, honesty, patience, and generosity. And these things have to be curricular. What is patience? What does it mean to be patient? It has to be taught as a curriculum topic. It's one of the fundamental flaws of secular education, by the way, that this stuff is not taught. Is that character education is fundamental in all education systems. Is there a clear effort to instill aversion to sinfulness, injustice, immorality, and negative character traits? What is that dua we make? Allahumma habib ilayna al-iman. Allah, make Iman beloved to us. وَزَيِّنْهُ فِي قُلُوبِنَا. Adorn it in our hearts. وَكَرِّهْ. And make distasteful, make hated in our hearts. Al-kufra wal-fusuq wal-asyan. Disbelief, right? Wickedness, and any form of disobedience against you. And the next one. This one's really important and subtle, and please don't take any offense. I'm going to take names. Unifying, education has to be unifying. What that teacher and what that madrasa is teaching your child, what that masjid is teaching your child, has to be unifying. It has to promote unity within the ummah, not sectarianism, right? And I'll read this out because I think I've framed it nicely. A good Islamic education should connect children to the universals of Islam: belief in Allah, love of piety, love of the Prophet, good characters, good character, and sharing prophetic values. It must not divide them into ideological camps. Sometimes educational settings today, individual teachers included, are subtly or overtly teaching children to identify with specific sectarian or ideological labels. They're teaching them to be Brelwi first, Deobandi first, Salafi first, Sufi first, Muslim after. Those identities are first. The Muslim identity is secondary to that. Their Islam is framed by these secondary ideologies. So we have to ask, is my child being taught Islam in a universal and unifying way, or being shaped to belong to a particular group, right? So teachers must emphasize shared beliefs and values. Different perspectives exist, madhahib exist, ideologies exist, but they must be presented respectfully and rationally. And the focus should be to connecting children to Allah rather than to a particular group. It has to be unifying, and they have to teach that yes, all these groups exist, but that's unity in diversity. That's unity in diversity. It has to be framed in that way. Finally, an Islamic education has to be orientational. I've run out of time. It has to be orientational. Orientational means it has to build a way of thinking about reality, a way of thinking about life, a way of thinking about morality, a worldview, a method of thinking. It has to be orientational. And finally, it has to be Islamic sciences based. The way English, when your child learns literacy in primary school, It's connected to GCSE English, connected to A-level English, connected to a possible degree in English, connected to a BA and an MA in English. In that way, children have to know that there are Islamic sciences, fiqh, hadith, aqidah, tafsir, and so on, ulum al-Quran, ulum al-hadith. They have to be introduced to these things, and then the pathways have to illuminate in front of them. Oh, I could potentially go and study this at secondary level, at sixth form level. I can study these things at undergraduate level. I could even do a PhD in fiqh. I can do a PhD in Islamic theology, and so on and so forth. These pathways have to be open to them. These are some of the features. I will inshallah publish this. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم.